What's going on, home gym junkies? It's your boy Habanero Gym Review, back at you with another video to satiate your home gym gear addiction. And for this video, I'm gonna be talking about the C10 sliding bench by ForceUSA. And I'm gonna show you guys how this bench is the most innovative and the greatest bench of all time, in my opinion. But even though this bench is so great, it still has its flaws, and I will be pointing them out to you guys in this video. And also, I will be showing if this bench will work for various types of rack that you may have, type shit. First, let me show you guys how this bench works with the Rep Aries 2.0. My little one rep max at 280 pounds. Not too crazy. And also, some specification for the bench is that the width is 27 inches, the height is 18 inches, the length is 68.5 inches, the bench weighs 167 pounds, and the weight rating for the bench at a flat position is 992 pounds. Also, for the hack squat leg press feature on the bench, the weight capacity for that feature is 440 pounds according to ForceUSA. Now, the hardest part of setting the C10 bench up is finding a way to mount your foot plate. So what I did was I used my belt squat rack attachment. I showed this on a previous video, but I used the belt squat rack attachment from Rep, and I modified it by welding a bracket in order for me to slide this foot plate in. Now, this modification is probably going to cost like $100. All you gotta do is take it to a welder and get them to do it for you. I would do it for you, but then I gotta ship it to you, you gotta ship it to me. That's gonna cost a lot of money. So just find you your local welder and they'll be able to weld this bracket on for you pretty easily. So if you wanna do this setup, you just gotta do a little bit of research. Now, with this setup, I'm able to raise this foot plate higher up or lower it down if I wanted to. Now, with this foot plate, you have multiple holes here where you can just stick a bolt in and you can adjust how far you want your foot plate to go up or down. So it's very adjustable. And also you can change the angle of the foot plate. If you want it more angled like this, you can. And if you want it more angled up, you can do that as well. There's a couple of ways you can adjust this foot plate and really make it work for you. Now, if you don't want to do this whole setup, you can go ahead and grab you one of these lever arm leg press attachment, aka utility pad. Now, I know Bells of Steel sells one of these for like 300 bucks, and it's only like 35 pounds. Now, with that utility pad, you can just mount it in the front of your front uprights, and it'll act just like this foot plate and give you something that you can push off of. And so this foot plate here is really gonna be the hardest thing to set up. That's gonna be the most time consuming to set up for this leg press. And if you haven't seen in my last video, I hooked up a winch to the top of my rack. And what I do with the winch is basically, I connect it to my belt squat, and the belt squat is what holds the foot plate onto the rack so I can do leg presses and hack squats. And so if I wanna mount my belt squat onto the back of my rack, all I do is use my winch. Now, it just takes a little bit of a learning curve, but once you get it down pat, it's actually pretty easy. So it's really easy for me to get it out the way. It's really easy for me to set it up. So that's why I got a winch on my rack for that. And so all the non-believers, you know, the proof is in the pudding, you know what I mean? I got the fire, you know what I mean? This is just another normal habanero day, you know, we just chilling. And for connecting my bench to my low rows, instead of using the cables that it came with, I use this retractable ratchet strap. It's so that I can adjust the length of it really easily and not have to really adjust the bench to get that perfect length. So if you guys are using this setup, I would recommend using this ratchet strap. It just makes life a lot easier. Here's a little example. If you use the cable and you put it on, you might still have a little bit of slack. But with this ratchet strap, you can tension it down so it's perfectly tensioned so that in the very beginning of your movement, you're gonna have tension all the way through. Now, if you don't wanna use the ratchet strap, this bench comes with a couple of cables. You're gonna have to just test and play around with which cable will work best for you and your range of motion. But for me, if I didn't have the ratchet strap, I would be using the red cables. Let me just show you guys how it looks with the red cables. So how I set this cable up is I basically just connect this to the low row, and then I'm just gonna pull the bench all the way back until I got tension. So that's good. And that's gonna be perfect for you to start squatting. If you put too much tension on the cables, it's gonna lift your weight stack up and it's gonna put a gap, and you're not gonna be able to put the pin into the selected weight you want. So make sure you don't put too much tension on the low row cables. Another thing is the low row for the Rep Aries 2.0 is actually about 13 inches off the ground. Whereas the hookup spot for the bench, this spot right here, this thing is only 6 inches off the ground. And so this cable, it runs at a slight angle. Now how that affected is, you see right here, if I pull this cable up anymore, like this, you see it's gonna hit onto that bench. Now to counter that, what I'm gonna do is, instead of using this cable hookup, I'm gonna modify this bench by welding a spot up here for me to hook the cable up higher so that the cable is gonna run up more straight and it won't get caught up on this thing anymore. Now, another thing that you could probably do to counteract the cables catching right here is to just cut this down a little bit. So I think I'm gonna trim this down so that this part is just a little bit more narrower so that the cables can clear it a little bit easier. So as long as you place your bench far enough away from the low row, this will never hit this. So as long as you keep it far away, everything works fine. But if you have to keep your bench closer, you might run into some issues. So there's gonna be a little bit of playing around with that. So this is how the cable looks when it's fully extended when you're doing hack squats or leg press. Once you have enough tension on here, you can just open this and bring your stabilizer all the way out. And then you really don't need this for the hack squat and leg press, but if you want to extend it all the way out, you can, and it'll give you a little bit more stability. Now, when I do hack squat and leg press, I don't even extend this out and my bench doesn't move at all. Now, the second thing I don't like about this is that the distance of travel for this sliding bench, so the distance that it goes from the top of the movement to the bottom of the movement is the biggest determining factor on how much range of motion you will have on this bench when you're doing horizontal hack squats or leg presses. You see how the benches slide? From here to this rubber stopper, it's only about 22.5 inches. Now, I'm not an expert on range of motion, but I would think that the taller you are, the more range of motion you can have. And so for this bench, that's the biggest limitation. If you're extremely tall and you want that full range of motion from the very bottom to the very top, the length of the slider here might be the limiting factor. Now, when I have my shoes on and I'm 5'9" on my off days, I haven't checked in a while. I might have grown a little bit more, but as of right now, I'm only 5'9". And at 5'9", when I fully extend, you see that? I'm topping out. That's me hitting the top of the bench. So that's not giving me the full range of motion that I want. Now, if I just not fully extend, it won't be an issue. And so if you're a really tall dude and you have a really long range of motion, when your hack squats all the way down ass to grass, 22.5 inches might not be enough range of motion. And so you might end up topping out or bottoming out, depending on how you set your bench up. Now, there is a way to get about 5 more inches of range of motion on this bench, and I will show you guys how to do it. Now, this modification may make it a little bit less stable when you're at the full extension of this bench. I've been using it like this and I haven't had an issue, but if you try to replicate this, just know you're doing it at your own risk. I'm not an engineer, so this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Thank you. So the first thing I did to get more range of motion, basically get more sliding of this bench, is I'm just gonna remove this bumper. And now, when I slide the bench down, now I'm not stopping at the bumper anymore. I am stopping by this. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that out too. Now with all that removed, your bottom roller down here is what ends up catching at the end of this. So let me just show you the before and after. Now if you leave this rubber stopper in here, it's gonna go to here, right? But if we take the rubber stopper out, we can slide it back about 1 inch. I did a measurement, it's about an extra inch of clearance. Now, if you leave the stopper here and you just tighten it all the way down, when the bench slides back, it catches onto that. So if you take this off completely, yeah, it could be a little tedious taking this on and off. It's not too bad. But with that, it will give you just a little bit more range of motion. Now, if we go from the front of the bench to the back of the bench, you'll see that there's also another rubber stopper. Now look at this. You see how that rubber stopper is stopping this rail from fully extending back? So what I ended up doing was, I went ahead and removed that as well. Now, honestly, I don't know if removing those rubber stopper will end up damaging your bench over time, but for me, I don't really care. I'm just gonna do it anyways. Now, this is how it looks before. You see how much space we have before it hits the back rail. Now we take this off. This is how much it has after. You see how there's no space now? This bench is now able to slide much further up and much further down. But the only thing is now we don't have these rubber stoppers, so it's gonna be metal clanking on metal at the top. And at the bottom is gonna be this rubber roller jamming down to this bottom piece. Now, after I did that modification, I'm able to get 27 inches of range of motion on the sliding feature of this bench. Now this bench basically can slide 27 inches versus 22 and a half. So that's pretty significant, and that's gonna prevent you from topping out and bottoming out. But if you choose to do it, just remember you're doing it at your own risk. And now with the rubber stoppers removed, you can see I can get that full range of motion ass to grass and not top out at the top end. See that? So it just gives me more range of motion when I'm doing leg presses or horizontal hack squat. And ever since I removed the rubber stoppers, I haven't had any instability or my bench wanting to tip over at any part of the movement. And so for me, this modification works good, and it allows me to get the full range of motion that I want. Now, all because this modification works for me doesn't mean it'll work for you. So please try this at your own risk. Now, other than the cables and the foot plate, the only other thing that you're gonna have to set up is these shoulder pads. Now, these shoulder pads are a little bit hard to use at first, but once you get used to it, it gets a little bit easier. So all you do is just take it. There's these 3 holes right here, and all you do is you're just gonna stick this through the hole, and it has this little ring at the end. And what this ring does is when you slide it into the hole, this ring will drop down and it will prevent it from coming out easily. So this is how you do it. So once you got it in there, you're not gonna be able to pull it out until you lift this ring up, and you can actually, it can be a little pain, then you can pull it out. So the shoulder pad takes a little bit of getting used to take on and off, but once you get it, it's pretty easy. Now you might be wondering, why would you need a horizontal hack squat? Well, the thing is, the horizontal hack squat allows you to get much more volume into your leg without putting so much axial load onto your spine and onto your lower back. And so you can get a lot more volume in and not have to worry about agitating your back at all. Now that we cover the horizontal hack squat, let me show you guys how to set up for the leg press. And so for your leg press, all you're gonna do now is raise up your seat higher to about there. And we're gonna have to pull this bench out just a little bit. Now, once you got everything dialed in, you can just go ahead and start doing your leg presses. Now, I wish there was something you could hold on to, maybe some shoulder pads up here to give you more stability, but it doesn't feel too bad. Only thing is, when you're doing this, you have to start at the bottom of the movement, which is not really ideal. But the cables run really smooth and the rails run really smooth, and I'm pretty happy with it, to be honest. Other than not being able to start at the top of the movement, this feels pretty good. And because I got it hooked up to my weight stack, I never have to load any weight. And so I do save a lot of time in that regard to this setup. Now that we got the hack squat and leg press out the way, let me go ahead and show you guys how to set up the leg extension and leg curl. So first thing you're gonna do is just gonna put your leg extension and leg curl attachment up there. And we're just gonna raise it up to our desired level. I like it a little bit higher. Boom. And then we're just gonna slide this forward, just like that. And the cables that you use to set up your leg curl and leg extension, it's gonna vary depending on the size of your rack and how you have it set up. You're gonna have to play around with it a little bit for your setup, but with my setup, with the Aries 2.0 and the 42-inch depth, I went with the red cables. And so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hook up the red cables. So we're just gonna take one end of the carabiner and I'm gonna hook it up here. And then we're gonna route it through here, just like that. And then I'm just gonna take my ratchet strap and put it right here. And take this ratchet strap and put it right here. I like to put it so that the ratchet part is closer to the cable. And then we're gonna take this. And we're gonna hook them up to here. And then hook this up to here. Now once you got everything hooked up, we're just gonna tighten this. Give it a little bit of tension. Not too much. If you put too much tension on it, it's gonna cause either your bench to slide forward, or it's gonna cause your weight to come up and have a gap, and then you won't be able to put your pin into the hole. Now I chose to set it up like this because I don't want these cables here to run up against this thing, like how I showed you guys earlier. Now, once you got all your cables set up, you can adjust your lower leg roller up 1 notch or down 1 notch. There's 2 settings for it, and I like it on the longest setting. And then you can even lay down and get the full stretch when you're doing leg extension. And with this cable setup, you're hooked up to your weight stack, and so you never have to load any weight. And with this, it kind of gives you a constant strength curve. So the weight that you feel at the very beginning of the movement, it's almost the same as when you were fully extended. So you get a constant weight feel throughout the whole range of the motion. And to do leg curls, I like to just lower this thing to about there. And every time you move this up or down, or the bench moves at all, you have to readjust your cable. So having that ratchet strap where you can adjust the length of the cable on the fly, that's gonna be really the key to making this whole thing work in harmony. Now for the leg curls, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 different settings. I like to put my setting on about the 3rd one. That one feels greatest for me, and that's how easy and quick you can adjust that. Now let me show you guys how to do a leg curl on this. Check out my booty. Now I wish this bench had a decline function so I can get more stretch in my hamstring, but because it doesn't decline, this is the best you can do, and it's not that bad. Let me show you. So at the very beginning of the movement, the weight feels just as heavy as towards the top, but once you get to the very top, you kind of lose tension. But having that full weight feel at the very beginning of the stretch portion is really what is ideal, and I feel like this works really great. All right, let me go ahead and show you guys the strength curve of this leg extension, leg curl attachment hooked up to a cable system. So I got both weight stack hooked up to 10 pounds and 10 pounds. So that gives us 20 pounds total of resistance. So I'm gonna use this luggage scale to measure the weight feel of this leg extension attachment at different range of the motion. Now I know this isn't 100% accurate, but this is what we got and this is what we're doing. So right now we have 20 pounds loaded onto the weight stack. Let's see how much we feel at the very beginning. So at the very beginning, we're getting 37 pounds. So that's almost a 2-to-1 ratio. All right, towards the middle, we still have 37.9 pounds. So from the beginning to the middle, it's relatively constant. Now let's see how much we feel towards the end of the movement. So towards the end of the movement, you're still at 36.9 pounds. So it's still pretty consistent throughout the whole range. Now let me go ahead and record the weight feel at the very end, at the very top of the movement. So once you fully extend, the weight dropped down to about 32 pounds. So once you get this thing all the way out, you do lose a little bit of weight feel, but for the most part of the movement, the weight is gonna stay constant. Now, let me go ahead and change the weight to 20 pounds and see how that changes everything. All right, we got the weight set to 20 pounds and 20 pounds. That's gonna give us 40 pounds, so we're actually doubling the weight. All right, so at 40 pounds, let's see how much we feel. So at 40 pounds at the very beginning of the movement, we're at 67 pounds. So earlier at 20 pounds loaded, we had about 38 pounds. Now at 40 pounds loaded, we're showing 67 pounds. So that's about 20 pounds more. So what that means is whatever weight you set the weight stack to, you're gonna get 20 more pounds on the weight field. Now let me go ahead and measure it at the middle range of the motion. So at first we had 67. Now towards the middle range of the motion, we're at 64 pounds. So that's pretty consistent with the earlier testing. So that shows that the weight is still pretty constant throughout the range of the motion. Just to sum it all up, guys, if you load 20 pounds on this attachment, you're gonna feel 40 pounds. And if you load 40 pounds on this attachment, you're gonna feel 60 pounds. So whatever you load on, you're gonna add 20 pounds to it to know what the true feel weight is. And what I like to do when I'm done is I just unhook this, and then I'm gonna pull this cable here. I'm gonna leave this red cable on this machine at all time because that's what I use to hook everything up with. So what I do is I added a magnet right here. So I could just take these red cables and just magnetize them right there. And so when I'm not using these cables, they're just stored here, and there's tension added to the pulley right here. So this is holding on to these cables, and I just use the magnet to, you know, hold it in place. And whenever I need the cable, it's right there. And then I could just take this leg extension off when I'm not using it, and the cables is always there. And also this bench comes with a preacher pad, which is pretty handy. I don't use it because I have a curl station already. But if you need a curl station, you can set this up with your rack and you can curl right here. And it feels pretty good. I wish the pad was a little bit wider, but this is pretty fine. If you need a preacher pad, this will come in handy. And it comes with the bench, so it's kind of just a bonus, kind of like a buy one, get one free. And you can set it up just like that. Okay, so the last thing I love about this bench is that whenever you're doing like an incline press or a shoulder press where you need to move your bench back and forth, instead of having to get up and reposition your bench, you can just use the sliding feature to get into the position that you want for your bench. So it comes in really handy because it just makes everything move a little bit more fluidly. Let me give you a quick demo. Oh, see, it's a little bit too high. Let me just go ahead and bring this down. That's good, but now it's a little too far in the front. So all I gotta do is just adjust my bench. And this is a perfect spot. Nothing too crazy. Now, the double-edged sword to having a sliding bench is that it has a slight wobble. Let me show you. So because it's held together by a pin, you hear that? That's the bench moving just a tiny little bit. Basically, this pin right here and this hole, there's a tiny little gap, so it allows it to wiggle just a little bit. So I don't know how they would be able to really overcome that, except for making the tolerance between this hole and this pin really small. But what would end up happening is it would just make this pin harder to get into that hole if the tolerance is too tight. And so maybe there's a way that they can improve it, maybe have like an expanding pin or something. I haven't really looked for a solution. But the thing is, whenever it wobbles, all you have to do is add a little bit of leg drive in your bench and it will keep it much more stable. So every time I hear my bench wobble like this, it's just a signal for me to add more drive into my legs in order to keep my body more stable. And so it's not too big of a deal for me, but for some people, this wobble might be a deal breaker. And also because it has this ladder system, there's a slight wobble in the horizontal direction as well. And so not only does this bench wobble front and back, but it does have a side to side wobble as well. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this side wobble is probably something that's gonna always happen with adjustable benches and also benches with a ladder system. So if you guys have a bench with a ladder system or is adjustable that doesn't have this side to side wobble, please leave a comment in the section so I can probably buy that bench and compare it with this bench. Now, another benefit of having a sliding bench is that you can incorporate it into your lever arm system very well. Let me elaborate. So with the lever arm system, when you're trying to set up for a bench press, you have to set your bench up accordingly in order to get the perfect range of motion. And so that means you gotta be able to slide your bench forward and back and you gotta lock your bench in place. But when you have a sliding bench, say, let's see, I wanna push this, I'm a little too far back. All I have to do is just bring my bench back just a little bit, and then I can lock in, and now I'm at a perfect pressing position. And let's say if I wanna go from bench pressing to doing a chest supported rows with my lever arm system, it's pretty easy. Let me show you. I'm just gonna slide my bench back and then chest supported rows. So that's just a little sneak peek on how I integrated the sliding bench into my lever arm system. In my next video, I will elaborate more on how I got this sliding bench to integrate with my lever arm system in order to make the greatest lever arm system for machine-like workouts. So please stay tuned and like and subscribe if you want to see more content. Okay, now that I showed you guys all the quirks and features of this bench, let me show you guys how to set this bench up with all different kinds of rack that you may have. So throughout this video, I have showed you guys that the bench works great with the Aries 2.0 because it has 2 cables. Now, if you have an Aries 1.0 where the cable sits lower down here and a little further apart, that's gonna work even better because when it's lower and more spread out apart, it won't catch on to this thing. And so when the cables are lower and wider apart, it can connect to this thing a lot easier. Now, if you don't have a rack with 2 cable system, and you have a rack that only has 1 cable pulley for the low row, the C10 sliding bench will still work with it. The only thing is the depth of your rack has to be at least 30 inches. Any less than 30 inches, you're not gonna have enough space for the cables to clear. Let me explain that a little bit further. So what I'm gonna do to simulate 1 cable is I'm just gonna take this banana clip and I'm gonna attach it to this thing. So now I have both cables going to 1 carabiner now. And so this is gonna simulate having just 1 cable hookup. So now if you only have 1 cable hookup, all you need to do is add a banana clip to that 1 cable hookup, and now you have 2 hookup points. So we're just gonna take our ratchet strap and we're gonna attach it to this. And then we're gonna take our ratchet strap and we're gonna attach it to our bench. And so this is how it looks. Basically, I have 1 banana clip to connect both cables together to simulate having 1 cable. And then I put another banana clip to split that 1 cable into 2. As long as the distance between this carabiner to the length of your front uprights where you're gonna be mounting your foot plate, as long as that's 30 inches apart, you're gonna have enough space between here and this spot right here, because this spot is really where this cable can get caught up in. So as long as you have 30 inches of travel on this cable, you're gonna be able to hook up your C10 sliding bench to any low row pulley. Now, let me show you guys how that looks. So this is how you can do a setup for a low row with 1 single pulley. But let's say if you have an Athena type rack where the only pulleys you have is on the front upright, well, I have good news for you. You can connect your C10 bench to the cables on your front upright functional trainer. Let me show you how. We're just gonna release this. We're just gonna take this out. Also release this. I'm gonna take this out, and then we're gonna take this and we're gonna hook it up right here. We're gonna take this, we're gonna hook it up right here, and then we're just gonna retract this and just gonna tighten this thing. All right, we got tension. Same with this one. I know my cables ain't straight, but I don't care. Let's try it. All right. And just for the sake of it, I want to show you guys the C10 Bench and show you guys that it can also work with the GetRx RX3 Rack. As long as you have a way to mount a foot plate onto the rack, you can easily hook up the tornado arms to the C10 Bench. Let me show you. You're just going to take this ratchet strap, connect it down here. And then we're just going to take the ratchet strap, we're going to tighten it up. All right, so we got tension on there. We got tension on there. You just got to make sure you set the tornado arm so that it's kind of in line with the cable. And then you can just get down. And you can just push off. So there you have it. The C10 Bench will also work with the RX3 with the tornado arms. As long as you have a way to mount a foot plate onto your rack using a utility pad or using a setup like mine's, you can use the C10 Bench to do hack squat on your rack. All right, guys, there you have it. Another unaffiliated, unsponsored, unadulterated home gym content review. Now, I don't even know how I'm gonna make any money on these videos, so please just like and subscribe to the content and show your support.